Welcome to Faith Formation Live on this Sunday, January 31st, the last day in January.
Yeah.
So get ready to start February tomorrow. My name is Joseph Novak. I'm one of the pastors here at First Pres, and
I'm Paul Litterock. I'm one of the pastors here at First Pres too, and I am thrilled to be here.
me too.
Yeah.
I love Faith Formation Live, and I'm so grateful for the community we started to build here on Sunday mornings. And people who even bear with us when we go beyond our 15-minute timer. So that's it's a sign of
Yes.
true affection.
It's the honeymoon.
The turn is coming. That's right. But we can't see them tap their watch at us from their back pew, so that's okay.
No, we can't see them turn their computer off either.
That's also true. Welcome. Today we're in the fourth Sunday of Epiphany. And today our readings are taken from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 18, from Psalm 111, from 1 Corinthians 8, and from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1. Josh, if you'd put 15 minutes on the clock, we'll ignore that in about 15 minutes. All right. Paul, let's start with Deuteronomy, chapter 18. I love this text so much because I love the text that it alludes to from the book of Exodus, chapter 19, where God, or maybe it's end of 20 after the Ten Commandments, God speaks to the people at Mount Sinai. They hear this violent thunder, and they say, no more. We don't want that. That's not what we signed up for. We just want you, Moses, you be our sort of intermediary between God and us. We'll listen to you, you listen to God. You can put your life at risk. We'll just
tell us what God says.
Just tell us what God says, and we'll trust you.
Which they did really good.
They're stellar examples of listening and doing. But so Moses is here. This is the book of Deuteronomy, and for those who we've talked about Deuteronomy a few times over the years. But Deuteronomy is from two words that mean second law. So this is a reiteration of the basic tenets of the law that God gave to the people. And it's done at the end of Moses' life, prior to the people getting ready to go into the promised land. They're settled in a particular place. They are getting ready to move into the promised land. Moses is not going to go with them. And instead, Moses is sort of getting them ready. This is like their reminder sermon.
Yeah, before he dies.
Yes.
So his last word and testament is right here.
Yeah.
And so at the beginning, he preaches.
And so today, Moses promises that the Lord your God, verse 15 of chapter 18, will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your own people, and you shall heed such a prophet. And he reminds people, this, it turns out, is what you wanted. Right?
Remember when you said, we just want you to speak? Well, God said, okay, and that's now how God's going to deal with you. And this is probably the only real part of the Torah that would lead us towards anticipating a Messiah or some other figure to come down the road. Certainly the prophet, the office of prophet is going to fulfill this, standing between God and you and doing and sort of giving you direction from God. But later, some Jews are going to begin using this to anticipate something greater than just a conventional prophet, somebody else, somebody like Moses. Is this a prophet like Moses, or is this just a prophet who's like sort of an oracle? And there seems to be something about leading and directing and guiding that is associated with Moses that they're waiting for to come. Yeah. Again, it's like these are the golden days kind of thing. Looking back, remember when there was a prophet like Moses, who would speak with such authority?
Yes.
Maybe there's a tie to
that's the tie to the Gospels text today.
Yeah.
There's something about speaking with the authority of God that is maybe something that here you're encouraged to pay attention to that. Yeah.
And there certainly were between Moses and John the Baptist, right? There's certainly some prophetic voices that speak for God. There are other prophetic voices that don't speak for God, and it becomes a real confusion for many people.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Deuteronomy 18.
and let's just keep cruising. Psalm 111 is good. It's a great psalm. I love Psalm 111 for verse 7 especially. The works of God's hands are faithful and just. All his precepts are trustworthy. Yeah. There's something about God's sort of character. We often maybe remember the end of Psalm 111, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Sure. You know, I saw a great coffee mug, Paul, that you would like. It says on it, I can do all things through a verse taken out of context. I was like, oh, that is good. I like that. And sometimes we rip that verse out, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and we sort of, we remove from it all of what came before it, and we just make it a little mantra. But there's a lot else here that the fear of the Lord who is doing acts of, how does the psalmist put it, of faithfulness, justice, trustworthiness, showing the people the power of his works, providing food for those who fear him. There's a sense in which the fear of that Lord, like the reverent humility before that God, is really the beginning of wisdom.
Right. Verse 2 kind of alludes to that too. Great are those works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. The fear of the Lord is to delight in the works of the Lord and to study them. So it's like your heart is set on them and not on others.
Yes.
And that's wisdom.
I remember being a kid in Sunday school and being reassured by so many Sunday school teachers that, like, the Bible, when it says fear God, it does not mean be afraid of God. It means be reverent of God. But I think there's a good, as an adult, I want to come back to, like, you know what? Being afraid of God is, like, actually probably a very good place for us to be sometimes. Like, sometimes because we can run the risk of making God so much just conventional, humanesque figure that, like, oh, well, God would never do that. Like, that's, like, God, we can be reverent of God like you're reverent of, like a political leader.
Right.
But this is like, there's a deeper thing here when you're meeting the creator of all things. I think there's like you could be afraid a little bit of that encounter.
Yeah, I have a good picture of that growing up with my father. Was kind of that character. That picture was like, oh yeah, this man is a good man.
Yes.
And I feared him because I was in awe of him, because he was amazing. I'm just a wonderful man. But I was fearful of him many times because, whoa, this is not a man that I trifle with. This is not a man that I'm going to just pull the wool over his eyes and do whatever I want, because that's going to come back to bite me or to swap me or whatever it's going to be. And I learned that pretty quickly. And I don't want to equate God with that, but there's
something on the other. Yeah. There's something of being afraid that is not a bad thing. And sometimes I think I would never be afraid at God. It's like, I mean, when the angels of God show up, like, people are afraid. So if God shows up, like, you're going to be like, oh, if an angel shows up, I'm scared. But, like, God, oh, I know you.
He's
like,
my buddy, man.
That's my old neighbor, Okay, 1 Corinthians 8 is our fun reading for the day about food sacrificed to idols. But,
I'm glad we don't have to worry about that.
We've solved it. Food sacrificed to idols is, in Corinth, it's a very pagan city. Yeah. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. No. I guess I just mean pagan in the sense of other gods, worshiping numerous other gods and other deities, other pantheons are being sort of enshrined there.
Sure, including the emperor worship.
Exactly right.
Coming in there, yeah.
And so in Corinth, you had a variety, it was a cosmopolitan city filled with a variety of religious faiths that were there, and everyone had slightly different practices that they would do. And some of the cults there, the worshiping communities that were not Jews or Christians, would sacrifice their food to idols as a way of sort of showing deference to the gods, right? They would pour out drink offerings, or they would place food before statues as sort of an act of worship for that god.
Yeah,
and the question to the church was, and especially to the Jewish Christians, is, can we eat that food? Is that food, like, some people are going in to eat that food, and is that, like, by eating it, are we affirming tacitly the presence and reality of these other gods. We don't want to do that. We don't want to. So some people took a hardline approach. No one gets to do that, period. Done. No one eats food to idols. You are de facto committing idolatry by doing it. And others would be like, it's food. There is no other God besides the Lord. And so this is just a statue. I'm going to eat this food.
And I'm guessing it was probably the Jewish faction, Jewish Christians, that were a little more concerned about this than the Gentile Christians.
Sure.
This is a cosmopolitan community of faith as well.
Yeah.
You've got new converts that are coming. You've got Jews who've been following a God and have begun to follow Christ as the revelation of God. But you also have these Gentiles who've been following and practicing these other practices, who all of a sudden realize, hey, there is only this one God. So that was part of my former life.
Yeah.
And while I may still eat the food that's offered there, I'm not giving deference to the God that is there, because I've learned.
Yeah.
I've been taken over by this one true God. And so for them, they were probably just going about it and like not thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of other stuff that goes along with those temple worshipings too, which
Sure.
So there was other questions, not just about the food, but
No,
the
it's
food practices. That
I don't want to say slippery slope.
Oh, yeah.
But that would be the question.
Yeah.
Would be, so you start going down the road of eating food sacrificed to idols. What about temple prostitutes, or what about other acts here that are going on these temples? Is all of this stuff just like adiaphora, like unimportant matters, or is there something that we need to say, no, that's not okay, and this is? And so already in this letter, Paul has talked about, sort of sexual purity as a vehicle, as a way of saying, stop doing these things. Like you can't look at the way other faiths are demonstrating their devotion by these acts, which Paul's going to say, this is not okay. Like, you can't take a prostitute into your body. That is a problem. That's a problematic thing. That compromises something of your set apartness by doing this.
That's right.
So what I love about this is that in Corinth, these church-going folks just are trying to figure out the gospel in light of their culture.
Yep.
And they are colliding with the sense of like, well, can we or can't we? And whether or not they're going to listen to Paul is kind of, we don't get to know.
No. But Paul gives the guidance that he thinks, okay, this is what it is, and it's wrapped up in a bottom line. I love the fact that they're wrestling with these things, and they send him. It seems there's questions that they fire off to him, just like today.
Yeah,
right?
Paul, at the last session meeting, we someone brought up food and idols. We're just wondering, could you clarify that for us? And he's like, dear church.
Yeah.
He
is. And all these things come together. And I think this is the beginning, of a long answer that he's going to give for a couple of chapters, right?
Yes.
I think chapter 10 probably is where...
9, it gets really good.
Yeah, 9 he gets, I think, is his own... Yeah, he reflects on his own. But 10, I think, so right around... Yeah, 23. 10:23 is this: all things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial.
Oh, yes.
All things are lawful, but not all things build up. So there seems to be his answer seems to be leading to something like that. Like,
yes. No, and this is where I think it's interesting in a collision with our present moment, where what's at stake here in his argument is, look, you have these rights to do things.
Yes.
Even theological rights,
sure.
right? Like, there's no idol. These things are just like stones. That this food isn't like by its own self, isn't like going to pollute or contaminate. It's not going to like cause you to worship idols, right? Like, this. But the right to do it might not be the rationale for doing it.
That's right.
And that's what I think Paul is going to say at the end. Be imitators of me, right?
Yeah.
And in a way of demonstrating the humility that would say, okay, I feel really resolved in my position on this.
Yeah.
But I know that in insisting on my right to do it, I may inadvertently cause somebody else to misunderstand and think that they are worshiping. I can't change everyone's mind, so they might inadvertently be led to sin because in their mind, eating food sacrificed to idols is idolatry.
Right. And so your your right to do what you want
Yes.
does nothing more than tear apart the body of Christ.
That's exactly right.
And I pulled out an old note that was sitting here, and it's like I just scribbled things down. We're oriented towards each other, not towards myself, towards
Yes.
each other, for freedom, for our life to live together, for fellowship in that freedom, and for freedom in fellowship. Not to hold one another inferior or super faithful or
Yes.
anything else, but we are called together and given liberty and freedom so that we can finally live together.
Yes.
Focused on the one thing, which is
Yes.
who is Jesus. And I think you mentioned Paul says, look, I wish that you could be like me. And Paul is saying, look, I'm just imitating Christ.
That's right.
Who in Philippians, that great hymn, right? He says, do not look after your own interests, but look to the interests of others. Let that same mind be in you, who, though
Yes.
Christ was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God as something to be exploited, but emptied himself. So Christ had all the power to do anything.
Yes.
Right? The power of God, and yet he emptied himself and humbled himself to meet us where we were, even in our foolishness.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, I guess if it's good enough for Jesus.
I know, it's true. And I think that's where, like, we have to resist the impulse to turn the church or the gospel or, like, our life together to orbit around the sun of individual rights and liberties.
Yes.
Right? Which is like, I'm tired of it. You know, like, I'm tired of hearing this. This is the only rationale it's using. It's like, well, I have a right to do this.
That's right.
I have a right to not wear a mask. I have a right to not, get a vaccine. Whatever it is. And the idea of subordinating
Yes.
a right for the sake of a larger group, it's like that somehow that has become less important. I'm not going to say it's not on people's radars, because I think all of us, no matter who we are or where we come down, we are willing to sacrifice some rights for the sake of somebody else. So if you have a right, to consume alcoholic beverages, that you might subordinate that right when you are having dinner with somebody who has a strong feeling against it.
That's right.
Right? Like, no one is like totally like embracing this, like, I'll just do whatever I want whenever I want, but we hear that kind of creep in sometimes of just like, well, like, you can't tell me what to do. Like, no one can tell me what to do. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like, and Paul is sort of saying, you're missing the whole point.
Missing the point.
Like, it's not about figuring out what you have a right to do and what you don't have a right to do, right? It's about figuring out how is your actions building up
That's right.
this body.
That's right.
Like, how is it contributing to the life, to the well-being and flourishing of this community of faith?
That's right.
And if you could say, it's not really, then stop it.
Stop it. Yeah. And it's not just to build up the life of the body to become something great, but to become more like Jesus.
Yes.
So it's like, how is this building up the body so that we can
Yes.
care well for one another?
Yes.
And we can be humble before one another. And if it's not, then just stop.
Yes,
We're out of time.
we are.
Just
It's
stop.
true. And I would say let's talk about the gospel, but we talked about the gospel a lot in the sermon today.
Dude, you preached it,
Ugh.
man. It was spot on. I love that.
Thank
I love
you.
that. That was wonderful. I'm
It's a
gonna listen.
great great text and a challenging one, but it's a good text for our day.
Yeah.
So, thanks for tuning in to Faith Formation Live for this Sunday in January. Next Sunday, we're in February, and we're back with more on for our weekly get-together to chat. Go in peace this week. If you are reading ahead to next week's readings and you wanted to get some questions answered, you can send them in advance. You can text them to Paul anytime, day or night. He loves getting your texts at 2 in the morning. And, no, I'm just kidding. Don't text them at 2 in the morning.
Oh, you can text it too. I won't hear it. So, yeah, okay.
All right. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.